Hello and welcome to Behave, the podcast with your host, me, Dr. Tamsin Astor, your chief habit scientist, international speaker and author. And I am so excited today to have this fabulous guest, Leslie, with me. You can see, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, you'll see that she and I are both rocking out like kick-ass earrings. She has horse earrings, which is part of her journey, and you'll hear. And I have like panther earrings, because I'm trying to be like that fierce cat, right? So welcome, Leslie. Please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thank you. I'm so glad you could tell that they were horse earrings. Thank you so much. I wasn't sure. I'm Leslie Ungar, Electric Impulse Communication. I sound a little bit like an electric company because I named my business after a horse, Electric Impulse. 20 years later, I still get probably a call a week asking me to bid on some electrical job. But I'm not an electrical company, Electric Impulse Communication. I named it after a horse because I believe that this horse and I share the same DNA, and I thought it was a good idea to use his name. It probably was not, but I've used it, the Electric Impulse idea, to talk about it through coaching, speaking, and speech writing. I help supercharge people's presentation skills, which empowers them on their journey to wherever they want to ascend. So
I love it.
Charge does work, and it's named after a horse.
Fabulous. So my first question for you is, when I think about coaching, speaking, and horses, I don't necessarily put them in the same camp. So yes, I'm curious as to how did you connect those? How did those two become connected for you, Leslie?
I agree. And there's actually three ways. The first one is that when I stopped showing horses, and I showed horses for 25 years, when I stopped showing horses and I started my business, I found that in one-on-one coaching, I was using examples that I had learned from the show ring or from horses, things that horses had taught me. And I found that they seemed to resonate with my clients by using that story or that example. So that was one way. The second way is that the 25 years I showed horses, I was always coached. And I always needed to be coached one-on-one. I learned better one-on-one. And that's what prompted me to start my coaching part of my practice, was that I figured there had to be other people that, like me, learn best one-on-one rather than in a group setting. And always continue to learn, whether I was riding at the national level or the backyard horse show level. The third one is that you have to continue to learn.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So important. So, one of the things that I always think is so interesting, I rode from about the age of 8 to about 18 in a local farm near where I lived as a child. And one of the things that I always felt, and so I didn't do any show jumping or anything, but I just learned, I just was riding on people's back of people's properties and so on. And one of the things that I really realized pretty early on was that if I was in a shitty mood, my horse could feel it. If I was in a good mood, my horse could feel it, right? And I remember, starting to really have that sort of visceral feeling that, which now I would understand as like my energy body or, my emotional body, that extended out from my physical space, right? Yes. And that, that animals that are in tune with you can pick it up, right? And will respond to you. And so that for me was as you were talking, I was like, oh yes, like I can remember that as a kid being like really grumpy with my mom, like as a teenager, right? Or as a tween, and then getting on the horse and being all like, she's so annoying, she never lets me do that, and then the horse being all like jittery and me going, oh, now that's interesting.
Yeah. Yes. And, in this program that I developed, so as a result of using examples, coaching in a real, office, I developed this program that I call Horse Talk Lessons in Leadership, which is a one-day program to really, the horse is a four-legged mirror for the individuals, the participants' behavior. And so it's not a person saying it, it's really the horse. I'm like the kind of intermediary where I tell the person what the horse is telling them. And, one of the many lessons is that there's a saying in horses that if you have a day to teach a horse something, it will take 15 minutes. If you have 15 minutes, it will take a day. And the reason I say that is, just what you were saying is that they read your mood. And they're a total four-legged reflection of your mood. And so when sometimes you want to say, well, the horse is not cooperative. The horse doesn't want to move. No, you don't want to move. The horse isn't, the horse didn't wake up this morning going, I think I'm not going to listen to this Tamsin who's going to come to the farm today. I think I'm not going to listen to this person. The horse didn't wake up with that agenda.
Yeah.
And so it's on us, which I say that to empower individuals, not to blame them, but to empower them that they do have more power, even in working with a horse that they may have never met before, and may have never been with a horse before.
Right.
They're more empowered than they give credit for being.
So that's a really interesting thing, because I think one of the things that I found really interesting is that as a coach and as a parent is learning how to have conversations with people about how you come across, right? So, I remember one of my kids, used to go to this really grumpy stage, and he would just walk into a room and just say what was ever going on in his head or in his heart. And I remember trying to have a conversation with him and saying, look, when you walk into a room, you need to start by doing a bit of a read of the room, before launching into all of the shit that you're thinking and feeling and going through, which I get is very traumatic when you're 12 or 13 or 14. I really want you to practice walking into the room and see, is the person you're looking at looking happy? Are they looking sad? Are they looking tired? And there's something about learning to read the energy of people, right? Yes. And that's a really interesting thing, because I think, there's two pieces there, is learning to recognize it in others and learning to recognize it in ourselves. And I don't think we're not, I know, but that is not a key feature of a lot of educational systems, right? Emotional intelligence, learning to articulate your feelings, learning to recognize what's going on inside and how that's then translating to what you're doing in the world is not something that we are educated in. So that's a really interesting piece, that, right? And thinking a little bit about what that means for how we show up as humans, right? How we show up as coaches, how we show up as parents, how we show up as leaders, is learning to articulate our own experience and understand that around us. And the way you're talking about the horses, it's fascinating, is that it gives that extra level, and it's a mirror, and it's not you going.
Exactly. And one saying I have with clients is, look for the observable, measurable evidence. So they say, well, let's say I gave a bad speech today. Well, I'd say maybe you did, but what's the observable, measurable evidence? Or it was great. You were, but what's the observable, measurable evidence? And the horse provides that. So if they say, well, I am asking for more acceleration. Well, those four hooves haven't moved. So your observable, measurable evidence is that you have not
doing it.
Exactly. Or, there was one guy who said, well, the horse is unhappy. What he was really saying is he was unhappy. Because I said, what's the observable, measurable evidence? Is the horse swishing his tail? Is the horse ears back? Look, the horse is choosing to stay 5 feet from us. Yeah. He could go anywhere in this pasture. And so what is your observable, measurable evidence? So they're really a good sign of what is the observable, measurable evidence of what we are telling ourselves. What I call the stories we tell ourselves.
I love that. And so do you still work with horses, or do you just with your clients, or is that something, do you just use the learnings from that with your clients now?
Yeah, I use them with my clients, but of course that gives me, a good excuse to go and work with the horses on non-client days. So I can say, well, I have to go work with Gray Lady to make sure she's, on her game. And honestly, it's not just a story. Like all winter, even when it's like 10 degrees, I will still go out every few weeks, because I don't want the horses to think I just come when I need them.
Yes.
And so, like my husband thinks I'm crazy. Like, that's crazy. I don't think that's crazy. In fact, if you're showing a horse and you're working with a horse, let's say that you're having a bad day. You may put the horse back in the stall and say, you know what? Think about you're saying this to the horse. Think about why you wouldn't pick up that left lead and put him back in his stall. You don't put him out in pasture so that he can just eat grass and talk to his friends and completely forget the lesson. You put him back in the stall and say, think about why you didn't do that. And so, I do think that they do think. And so even when it's really cold, I'll go out because I don't want them to think I only come when I need them to.
Got it. Yeah. It's part of that whole process. It's like, well, it's about relationship building, which is really, what we're doing as coaches and speakers and like hosts of workshops and podcasts, and all of it is we're learning how to build relationships with people. Yeah. That's so interesting. I love this idea of the mirror, and that because it's actually, it's more than a mirror, I feel almost, because it's about a dialogue, right? It's that ability to go backwards and forwards and have a recognition, right?
Well, it's like a live mirror, because one of the things about horses, is that they're very forgiving. And so the picture that you get is that moment. They can be mad at you and then race off to the other end of the pasture. And what I will tell the group, it's always a small group of people, I will say, okay, get together and just exhale. And they do that a couple times, and I am not kidding you, the horses come back. Right. They can choose to be anywhere in the pasture and they come back. So they're like a real-time moving mirror. It's not a mirror that says what you like an hour ago. It's a real-time mirror.
So I have a question for you. Are there particular kinds of behaviors that like are mirrored more, like that works, like whether it's, grief or anger or confusion that you found to be really powerful in this situation?
Yes. After doing horse talk for about 10 years, I wrote a book, 100 Lessons from Horse Talk. But even though there's 100 lessons, yes, you're absolutely right. There are a couple that will get repeated in every horse talk session. Yeah. And one of the lessons that gets repeated, and the participants usually don't know each other. It's a small group of people that come together that day. Sometimes they may be from the same company, but usually it could be a CPA, an attorney, it could be a student, it could be, someone in insurance. It's a variety of different backgrounds. But the thing that will be most common is their lack of confidence in leadership. And that is one of the behaviors. And it comes out in, where are they looking? Let's say I have something I call the leadership walk. And you need to be looking where you're going. Yeah. Not a horse. Not behind you, the horse will follow. You need to have confidence that if you walk confidently forward, the horse will follow. And so that behavior of being tentative is something that is one of the most common in all the different parts of the day.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because it is. I mean, you have to be able to step into a position of authority, but not what's the word I'm looking for, like confident authority rather than kind of abusive authority, right? And I think that's one of the interesting things that I think, I think like the last few years in politics have really shown us like very different models of what it means to be a confident leader versus what it means to be a bullying kind of leader. And I should imagine that subtlety, well, it's not, I mean, it can be subtle, but it can sometimes be incredibly obvious. But I should imagine that distinction is also really important with what you do.
Well, and again, that's why the horse is in here. One time I have a school superintendent that came to one of my first horse talks, and she has come twice, but she has sent someone to most of my horse talks. And one year there was a high school principal, and we were in what I call the round pen, which is the part of the day where it's just the participant, a horse, and me. And their goal is to get the horse to walk, trot, and canter without being attached to the horse in any way. And the high school principal, he started screaming. But I stopped him and I said, would you scream at your high school students? And he said, no, never. And I wanted to say, well, I hardly believe that.
I don't believe you.
Because here he is, that's kind of like his go-to behavior is to scream. And when I just asked him that question, he just stopped in his tracks and he just shrank before me, and like, oh, I would never do that. So I think there's a high degree of not being aware that this horse
Right.
is showing him that, you know, he may say, no, I don't, but that horse is going, yeah, he does. Mhm.
No, and it's interesting, that thing about awareness, because I think one of the things that as well that I've loved about the last few years just in the world is the way that people are becoming so much more intimate about their personal struggles and experiences. And I feel like, you know, I mean, the way Brene Brown talks about shame, and I love the way Glennon Doyle talks about her experience. And I think, you know, one of those things about that awareness is, it's one of the things that I talk to my clients about, and it's a really interesting process. And I would love for you to answer me like talk a little bit about how this works with the horse piece. But I feel like there's two pieces. There's my awareness that I'm sad, I'm confused, I'm angry, I'm not confident, right? And then there's my ability then to do something with that knowledge, right? Can I explain that to the people I'm leading or the people I'm working with? Can I change my behavior in a way that makes sense and does what I need to do? Because it's that sort of two-phase thing of going, oh my goodness, right? Like, how do I access that information about myself? And then now that I know that, like, what do I then do with that, right?
And it's continual. You know, I had a guy, he was a former police officer who was now working in corporate America. And he thought he was a big guy, and he was like 6'2" or something, thought he was a big guy. Well, one of the horses that we work with is a breed called a Gypsy Banner, which most people will never see a Gypsy Banner in their lifetime, but it's a beautiful small draft horse. So it's about 2,000 pounds. And, you know, long mane, long tail, beautiful horse. Well, he started out bullying, you know, like you were talking about what we've seen on the political scene the last, you know, 4 years. We've seen a lot of bullying, and he started out bullying this horse. And I was kind of laughing because you can think you're a big guy, but tell that to a 2,000 pound draft horse.
Yeah.
And see how that works for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, he was greatly humbled and he learned a lot. But as to what you were saying, it's a continual challenge. You know, it's like, you know, eating well, it's a continual challenge. Maybe I do it for an hour and then I have chocolate. Maybe I do it for a day. So I think it's a continual challenge, which is one reason why oftentimes people will come back a year or two later and they'll come back to horse talk because they will have worked on something and they want to see if the horse agrees that they've made progress on it.
Got it.
It's going to be a continual. It's not, as I'm sure you would agree, it's not the magic one works and you just can wave it and they're
done the one thing. Yeah.
It's a continual, more of an acknowledgement and a realization to work on this behavior.
So I would love for you to share like your most amusing story about, you know, doing this work. One of those ones where you're just like, where you come home and you're like, honey, you wouldn't believe the day I had.
You know, I have two favorite stories, and I think the one that I would choose, we were in the pasture. About 2/3 of the day takes place on what I call the pasture, and there are two group exercises that can only be done successfully as a group. You can't do it as an individual.
Right.
And in the afternoon, some of the people that come to Horse Talk, I have never met before. They come to Horse Talk. Others are coaching clients that I know. So this particular woman, I'll name her Nancy, she was a coaching client that I saw on a regular basis. In the afternoon, I saw that she had just physically disengaged from the rest of the group. They were doing obstacle course, and she was just kind of standing by herself, not engaged, not contributing at all. And I kind of pulled her to the side and I said, you know, you need to stay engaged. And she said, well, I don't know anything about horses and I don't know anything about obstacle course. Well, nobody does. Who in their life has set up an obstacle course for a horse, right? I let it go because she was a coaching client and I knew I would see her again and we'd be able to revisit it. She called me a couple weeks later. She's in New York. She's working a meeting with 3 CEOs that she works with. At a break, one of them leaned over to her and said, Nancy, you're going to need to stay engaged. Now, are you really going to tell me that what happens in the pasture isn't the same thing as what happens in real life? Yeah. And that is what I love about.
I got goosebumps with that one, Leslie. Oh my God.
And how you are in the pasture is how you are in your career, in your life.
Yeah.
So that's why that is one of my favorite two stories.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like that energy. I had a cousin who didn't have children, but was one of those people that could walk into a room and pick up any crying baby, and, you know, the baby would be soothed. And I was always amazed that he would do this, because for me, I never picked up babies until they were my own. You know, like, and now I'm totally fine. I'm like, give me the crying baby, you know, because I've parented 3 kids. But before I had kids, I'd be like, I'm going to break them. I'm going to do something wrong. And there's something about that ability to connect and be deeply and energetically aligned, and to recognize that ability within yourself. I love it. So it's a really powerful service that you offer to people. It's really awesome. Thank you for the work you do in the world, Leslie.
Oh, my pleasure. And you know, if you remember nothing else, hip bones always have to be facing the horse. But if you think about it, hip bones should always be facing whomever you're speaking to, whether it's a waitress or whether it's a client or a patient.
Yeah.
They should always be facing who you're talking to.
I totally agree. All right, so we're going to move into the final 3 questions that I ask all of my guests on the Behave podcast. So the first is, what is a behavior that doesn't matter how much you've worked on it, you've been coached on it, you've been supported around it, do you find yourself falling off the habit wagon on a regular basis around?
Well, how far do I have to fall off the wagon to count it?
Okay. You can tell me, you can decide that.
You remember when there were thought crimes, and if you just thought something, that was a crime. Yeah. So, you know, I would say that I would put it in that category. You know, I blame my mom, because don't we blame our moms for everything? Okay. I was born with fat genes. Okay. I was a fat baby. I had cortisone shots my first 5 years. You know, my biggest challenge every day and every hour is weight. And, you know, the Peloton is one of the best inventions in the history of the world. Fortunately, I have a dog that I have to walk 3 miles a day. I have the Peloton, I have bar, but all of that together still is just maintaining. It's a daily challenge, because once you're a fat kid, you are a fat kid the rest of your life in your mind. And so there's not a day or an hour that goes by that I don't think about it in some way. Right.
Oh, that's tough. Yeah. No, that's a tough one. I get it. Oh, so the other question that I love asking people, because I find that it's often quite meaningful for the way we live our lives, is, what is a quotation that you absolutely resonate with, or that you turn to time and time and again, or that you've have like pasted on the wall, or that somebody said to you in a moment of crisis?
It's actually painted on the wall in my coaching room. Painted. You know, I'm a big believer in quotes, and I tell my clients that are speaking that if you have a favorite quote or two, you're always good to go. On 3-minute notice, you can always put together an effective speech. But this one is really my favorite one, and it's one that I talk about and reference all the time. It's not enough to merely know, one must know and do.
Oh, yes.
We all know pretty much. I mean, does anyone really think the fried onion loaf is good for you? I mean, really, does anybody really think that? We know, but it doesn't mean we do. Yeah. And I think sometimes knowing is the enemy, because we kind of think that since we know it, we have some higher moral ground. But, you know, in any aspect of communication, and to me, you know, that's just, you know, the bottom line for everything in every kind of profession, in every job is communicating. It's not just knowing, but it's doing.
Yes.
So I know that I should.
So true.
I know I should open with a wow. I know I should practice. But do you do?
Yes, you know, it's interesting. The last guest that I interviewed, she talked about that in terms of self-worth, and that self-worth is an action, and that you can know what your self-worth is. But if you're constantly not behaving in a way that affirms that, then you're not serving yourself. You're not reaffirming your self-worth. And that to really live into your self-worth, you have to act in a way that is in accordance with that. And that's so interesting. Yeah, no, you're so right. I think we have to remember that we live in action. We are doers, you know, and that we need to make sure that, yes, oh, that's so juicy. Okay, my final question, and I'm excited to hear your answer for this one, is if you had a theme song, Leslie, that played when you walked into a room and everyone was like, oh, Leslie's coming in, what would it be?
You know, before I answer that, I have to tell you, I actually had a client that wanted Hail to the Chief to play when he went up to a podium. And I actually had to tell him, no, you can't have Hail to the Chief, okay? But the song that I would tell you no one has heard of, but when I showed horses, one of the classes I showed in was called Arabian Mounted Native Costume, and you and your horse were dressed in an Arabian costume.
Oh,
and the music
wow.
that played when you entered the ring, and I fought and strategized to be the first one in the ring. So the music that was playing when you entered the ring was called Queen of Araby. And no one would know that unless you were at a horse show.
You're going to have to send it to me and we'll put it in the show notes so that everybody else can hear it.
You hear that music and you know it's the costume class. And I would say that would be my favorite, but I would say I Will Survive would be more familiar to people. And if I survived a family-owned business, anyone can survive anything. So I do think that I Will Survive is something, whether it's a pandemic, whatever it is, just a reminder that we all have that ability.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time with me today, Leslie. I really, really appreciate it.
It has been my pleasure. My crystal handled whip and I have been thrilled to be in attendance with you. So I thank you so very much.
My pleasure. And where can people find you? Where do you tend to hang out the most, Leslie?
They can find me on Facebook. They can find me on LinkedIn. They can email me, Leslie@electricimpulse.com. They can text me 330-607-5730. And I'm always answering.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing with us today, Leslie, and have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.